Hey everyone, welcome back. So first of all, congratulations to all of you. We finally did all the lessons and we made it. Now, before I proceed to the final notes as well as the conclusion, I would like to draw your attention to one of the very crucial and important point. You might going to get stuck if you like to use this approach. Well, there's nothing to fear. We got the solution. The thing is that let's imagine the situation, guys, like the way we did. We create the sand from a creature that was basically given some animations and all of that, but you might have noticed that the body motions or the mechanics of that creature was not fast enough to break the fluids. Now the question comes, what I'm actually talking about is break the fluids. What exactly is this something called breaking the fluids? Now, many of you maybe know this fact. Like if we have an animated emitter of the fluids, and we are giving certain animations. Let's say I have a ball or a ring in my hand and I just select the ring at frame 0, and let's say at frame number 100 I just translate the x-axis of the ball to the 150 positive x-axis. So if you scrub the timeline or replay the timeline, what we're going to do, the ring will obviously going to proceed to the positive values of the x-axis. And let's say if the ring is traveling inside the fluid container and the ring is also set to the surface emitter of the fluid container, what we're going to do, obviously the ring, based upon the properties mentioned in the fluid containers, will going to emit the fluids. But the emission of the fluid will going to be in a problem. Let's say how. Let's have a very basic example. As you can see, I'm having a tube in front of me and I have given this as an emitter, as a surface emitter inside the fluid container. Now it's time to play the timeline and you'll obviously going to observe some weird patterns. Okay, so now let's just play the timeline and let's see how this tube goes and rolls, and let's see what exactly is the weird thing you can notice. Let me just play it for, let's say, 40 to 45 frames, and then I'm gonna put that into the stop. Alright, so that's sufficient. So guys, here you can see that, as might you have noticed, these weird stamp patterns. Now there is an issue in Maya Fluid. Whenever you consider a fast moving object, not required generally to be very much fast, but still an animatable object in which the fluid, or you can say the buoyancy of the fluid, is a little bit slow, and the fluids are taking much more time, or you can say some slower time to solve the properties, or you can say the fluids are a little bit slow, the simulation time is also slow. In that situations, you might gonna get some kind of weird stamp patterns. Well, what I can see is that there is a regular pattern, which is basically, you can say, some sort of a stamp, or you can say the area missed, but that missed area is exactly in a regular pattern, which creates a very, very bad and artificial impact. So what should I gonna do to address that is issue? It's really gonna be simple. It's the game of a one click. Now just roll up yourself, I believe so, in the second lesson where I asked you that I'm gonna come on to this most important option that is called the motion streak. Okay, well guys, just let me tell you one thing more specifically also. Since this is not actually the part of the tutorial, I am actually making this one because you might could imagine in your own artistic way to utilize this training in your own examples. So in that way, if you are using a very fast moving objects, you may gonna get yourself puzzled up in these situations. But those who need some refreshing, this lesson is basically for them. Okay, so in this case, what I want to do is that the usage of motion streak will going to solve all the problems. The moment we switch on this option called motion streak, if we go further up, you can find under the basic emitter attribute there's something called max distance. Well, the by default max distance value is 1.0, which means that from this emitter till 1 centimeter distance from all the surface, or you can say from the normals of the surface, the fluid will going to cast itself. Well, that's going to be really very, I should say, something which is out of control, because 1 is really going to be a very big value. So the solution for you is that you can put that thing to approximately 0.1, and if you still feel the need to increase the fluid, what you can do is that you can play around with the rate particles. Let's say in my condition, I use 250 as a rate particles, or maybe let's say 150 in the initials, then we're going to play it for further if we feel the need. And the max distance is must have been set to 0.1. Now guys, just remember the previous results and now compare this one. Let me just play that up once again, and now you're going to see all of those stamp patterns which were making our vision a difficult, or you can say our are focusing us, are making us a bound to notice them and to consider the fluid, which is not really going to be very realistic, has completely gone. Okay, but now since I'm using this thing for the demonstration purpose, I should also need to tell you one thing, that I haven't utilized that option in my course. The reason why, because in my situation, no doubt the sub-steps were more, the negative buoyancy was really much more, so, and as well as the forward advection was also there. So some of these things were already got rid away. But in many situations you are not required to use only this example, but just for your sake of knowledge also, I believe so this option is very, very important. All right, so I believe so guys, I made my point clear to all of you. And one another good suggestions I would like to give it all of you to tweak your Sandman course. What you can do further is that you can also allow to play with the fluid emission turbulence. What you can do in that files, or you can say after learning all the curves, all the lessons, then it's time to it's time for you to do some more experimentations. So what you can do is that you can play around with the turbulence approximately 2, and you can play with the turbulence speed, and obviously you can reduce the turbulence frequency with the tail turbulence set that to on. And then if you're gonna play the render, you'll see some noticeable, or not noticeable, but you can say some in a very artistic way, some breakings, or you can say the disintegration in the sand will coming, because this turbulence will gonna create the random behavior of the fluid emission. So that's also gonna be very interesting. But since I haven't included that, because my artistic decision at that time was not asking or allowing me to include this tool, or you can say command. And one another thing I also noticed in my simulations was that, since that was the 18th render, so what I did was that I also played around with a very less viscosity. But the only issue I experienced was that with the usage of the viscosity, the fluids were taking a little bit more rendering as well as the simulation time. But if we compare the sand, this may could add a little bit more flavor to this. I think so 0.010 is still a big value. You should use 0.005. That would completely going to be something really very good. Okay, so these two important things I considered for all of you to include, but only in your experimental project. All right, and it is required once you go through with the course completely, and then you can start putting up your own experiments. Okay, since these methods are not the only method of creating effects like that, you can also come up with your own ideas, and we can share in the forums also. All right, so I think so it's time to wind up the things, but before we do, let's take a final look at the project. And this creature guys comes from the floor, sorry, it comes from the sand, of course, with the emission of the sand, emission of the particles, and the static sand that has already been dispersed upon the ground. All right, so I believe so friends, I made my point clear to all of you. Since I really gonna enjoy this tutorial a lot I should say, and I also love the output as well, thanks to the digital tutors, and thanks for all of you to watching this stuff. We're gonna see you soon for sure.